Welcome to the Brisbane Property Podcast with your hosts Melinda and Scott Jennison.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Brisbane Property Podcast. My name is Scott Jennison. I'm the Acquisitions Manager here at Streamline Property Buyers. Always good to have a guest, and a guest we've had on before. And welcome back, Andrew Burke from Ray White Special Projects. Welcome.
Scott, Melinda, great to be here.
Yes, Andrew was a bit surprised when he arrived today and he said, "Oh, you actually video now." So apologies for the surprise, Andy, but look, you're in a business shirt anyway, so there's nothing to be embarrassed about. So it's not about what we look like, though. It's about the content that we share, and we're really excited that Andrew's going to join us. If you have listened to previous episodes where Andrew's been a guest, he works in the space of development sites here in Brisbane. So we're going to get a really good overview of what's been happening in that space in the environment where interest rates have been increasing. Of course, construction costs have escalated in the same period of time. So super excited to be getting a rundown of what's happening across Brisbane and the regions around Brisbane in terms of development.
I know, Andrew, that people love our podcast when I talk about the weather, but it's so hot and muggy here in Brisbane at the moment. And I know when we were talking off air that you said you thought you might duck home and get some shorts and a T-shirt on, and then got the shock when we said we're actually recording the...
I'm glad I left the business shirt on.
You would have got away with the shorts anyway. So mate, we've known each other for a while. We were, again, talking just before we chatted, and you've been in this space similar to us, and things have changed a fair bit. I think you would have probably seen over the time.
They have. So, but look, I think the game we're in, it ebbs and flows, doesn't it? But I think there's an underlying message here is that, there's a couple of challenges in the market for a couple of things, but overall, it's a story about population growth. It's no more complicated than that. We're in southeast Queensland, and we do a bit of work regionally as well within Queensland. There's a story here. We're not out in the Badlands, and this is going to be real hard to sell. Things are going to sell while some sub-markets have tightened a little bit. Overall, it's a very positive story. So just for the people listening, the people tuning in as well. So Andrew Burke is my name, and I work for a Ray White franchise based in the city in Brisbane, in Ray White's head office. We're called Ray White Special Projects. So the vast majority of what we do is selling residential development sites. So we sell sites to the developer, and the developer will then build units. They might build townhouses, or they might build land subdivision sites. But there's also other things we do. We sort of sites for childcare or even schools, but predominantly residential development sites. And also we've sort of morphed into lately a fair bit of what we call residential investments, meaning blocks of units or NDIS providers or boarding houses. So that's what we do. And answer your question, things have changed. I've sort of been with these guys about 9 years, and I think we've sort of had two booms there. And I don't think I'd call selling development sites a bust in the last year or two, but it tightened, and what we had was a lack of activity.
Okay, so
that's what changed. So yeah, it's just the amount of transactions. So when people say, "Oh, the market's horrible," we've just been overly spoiled. We had abnormal growth, and it just sort of pared back a bit, and people sort of took a deep breath, and they became a bit more cautious in their decisions, and values didn't plummet spectacularly at all in development sites. They certainly have come down a little bit, but overall there's a lot of activity. And I liken it to, because I like cricket a lot. I liken it to, it's just the new ball. It's the second new ball.
Yep.
Right.
Things are going well, and we've got a little bit of a hard patch to get through. Then we'll get going again. And we're already seeing signs of that within certain submarkets.
If I was to ask you, Andrew, looking back over the last 12 to 18 months, what was the strongest performing market in all of those market segments that you're very active in? How would you answer that question?
Easily, it'd be the land subdivision market. Still holds enormous depth of buyers and strength, particularly a lot of interstate developers who see the story here. We're simply constrained by land. And it's bizarrely Queensland, and I said last podcast, Southeast Queensland's quite fragmented with its ownership, so it's not easy to put together 3 or 4 owners to get a large parcel. So, yeah, it has gone very well. We've sold a lot of land subdivision sites and they had a lot of interest. The difference would be in the last 18 months is that there's always a difference between certainty and uncertainty with planning, but that's never been greater at the moment.
Yep.
So if something is approved or zoned well and easily to convert into, we see a lot of interest. If something has a few challenges, you have two buyers making an offer. So it would be probably sites that are very clear cut, it's still very strong. Sites that have challenges still get the same level of inquiry, but it doesn't translate into as many offers as that it used to. So that'd be the real change.
I think we had a chat, might have been on our property panel that you were on a while ago, Andrew, and we were talking about these subdivisions. What about the construction things these days? Because I know back then you were talking about they couldn't get pipes, they couldn't get gravel, they couldn't get any materials to actually do those subdivisions. What's happening then is
civil cost has gone up, I think probably all the public knows how much construction cost has gone up. So in the subdivision space, that's all the earthworks and whatnot, that's all gone up. So the rule of thumb used to be about 100 grand to develop a lot. Now it's about 130. So it's gone up a lot, but in comparison to how much construction cost has gone up to build form, i.e. units and townhouses, it's still quite manageable. And you've just got that much population growth coming that they've got it, and there's a lack of land here that one thing to keep in mind is they have this document the state government works with called the South East Queensland Regional Plan, which is essentially saying these are the pockets we want to unlock and develop. Now, they ran the ruler over that again and had a real good look at it, and it was a little bit underwhelming how much land was released because there's land that's zoned and then there's land which has to be serviced. So you're dealing with state governments and councils. It's all very well saying, here's your land, but you can't service it with sewer and water. Who's going to pay for that? So I think that supply area is keeping supply constraints is keeping the prices still up even with those increases in construction.
Andrew, with that greenfield land subdivision, where is it throughout Southeast Queensland that the majority of those lots are becoming available, or the majority of those lots have transacted recently? Are there certain pockets that are releasing more of that developable land than others?
Yeah, it's there's sort of always on the extremities of town, as you can imagine. So the areas that are most being developed is that Logan corridor between Brisbane and Gold Coast and further west from there. And then if you go, that'll be the main area. And the second area would be that western corridor, sort of Ripley around Ipswich that way. So they're some of the least constrained, because if you go to the other traditional areas down at Redlands, down Bayside Way, I mean, you can only go so far east because you've got the water.
That's right.
And then there's a whole heap of environmental factors, quite a lot of chicken coops and chicken facilities down there, and they have areas around them you can't develop. So there's a few issues with that. And then the north, between Brisbane and the north coast, there's not a lot left. But the big one everyone's talking about in the future, not yet though, is this Caboolture West corridor. So for listeners, so between, sort of in very rough terms, between Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast, between Brisbane and Caloundra about halfway, but go sort of poke your nose in 15, 20 minutes west going ahead. So that's identified as a key area as Logan fills up, and it can't all be about that western corridor.
Perfect. The other thing that I did want to ask is, in relation to Brisbane City Council region, is there any land left in those pockets, or is that now pretty much fully developed?
Very hard to find some. It'd just be very problematic sites with vegetation constraints, or
good to know.
You've got a real fight on with the council to get through. I mean, things sell but generally there's no scale. You'd be hard pressed in Brisbane City Council getting something more than a dozen lots.
What about apartments? We've heard through a lot of data that comes through at a national level that building approvals are down for both units and freestanding dwellings, and commencements are down. What are you finding in the local Southeast Queensland market?
Oh, it's a pretty clear story. Everyone's just talking about the same thing: construction cost. Cutting to the chase, it's not viable for these developers to purchase land to build units unless their end product is trading over 850,000. So they're not going to buy a site unless they can guarantee that when they build this unit tower, their lowest price unit is over 850,000.
That's a significant price for some entry level buying.
So it's simply, I mean, I've sort of taken sites to various developers and said, look, there could be an opportunity here, and they've sort of showed me the fee zone and said, if you gave me that land for free, I can't make any money out of it.
Wow.
So, we'll have owners who will say, I've got these 4 houses here and I've got this DA for this many units. And we'll say, that's great, but I reckon I'm an agent. I love a deal, but I reckon you're better off going to the local agent who'll just sell down those houses individually because you'll get more money. It's worth more as houses at the moment.
That's fascinating. And I'm sure part of that is due to the increased holding costs, given that interest rates are higher, the cost of money is higher, so development finance becomes more expensive. But not only that, as you've pointed out, the actual development costs have increased at so many levels, with the construction costs escalating as well. Does that mean that the supply of new apartments in Brisbane will be constrained for some period of time?
Absolutely. So it's important to note, though, that the top end is still selling very well. So the people who can build those units, and, the 2 ones that easily spring to mind are Mosaic and Aria.
Yeah.
They build good products for high-end stuff and they sell very easily. So there's a demand there. So, look, I think there'll be definitely be, and there already is, a constrained supply of units, because that next tier down I was talking about, 850, whatever it is, and below, it's just not happening. If you look at, and that sort of translates into a middle ring suburb.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at a middle ring suburb in Brisbane, that is you're just not getting that revenue at the moment. Or you'll get there one day. But how long do you want to wait for? There's other things to do with your money.
We've often talked about apartments and townhouses obviously together. When we talk data, obviously they are together. Townhouses is something, and you've just talked about there's no land in Brisbane. Townhouses haven't been being built for a while, and it's probably something we're not going to see change too much.
Yeah, look, there was an issue with the Brisbane City Council. They sort of, quite rightly so, got irritated when people were converting surplus land, a lovely big Queenslander block, and chucking a couple of townies at the back. It sort of didn't look great for our fabric. But what they stopped doing, the law was it encompassed too much, and stopped these people who had 3,000 square metre blocks of land, which was zoned emerging community, which were, you could punch out some townhouses in. So I think that needs to be revisited. The good thing about townhouses too is they can be staged if there's construction issues. So I think the answer is somehow getting more townhouses in those middle markets.
And that involves a whole host of issues in itself, because it would require a change in some council planning schemes and some of the rules around what we're currently able to do, which is a process in itself.
And they'd have to be, you can sort of pretty much identify where they are, because it's never going to happen in areas where you've got big colonial homes.
Yeah.
It's going to be in the more sort of post-war homes.
That's right. I want to also talk about the current rental crisis that we're experiencing Australia-wide, but more specifically here in Brisbane, southeast Queensland. Vacancy rates at the moment sitting at 1.1%, rents significantly increasing month on month and year on year. And a lot of tenants are finding it tough. There's going to be affordability constraints, potentially a change in household formation. One of the suggested, things that might change this issue that we're having is this build to rent space. One of the solutions, that's the word I was looking for. Is there anything happening in that build to rent space? And if so, what does that pipeline look like for Brisbane?
Look, I don't know the statistics, but it's certainly flavour of the month. Look, it's a sector that's on the rise. I personally controversially am a little bit just, I suppose, curious whether this is going to translate into finished product, because it appears to me if your local developer who's using their own money can't make it stack, why can why can only large funds do it? So to me, that would be maybe they're assessing, maybe they're putting in differing escalation in their rents, or what we'd call the terminal value in their cash flow. Or the other thing, look, maybe they do have their own building arm, maybe that's an advantage. But part of me can't help but think a lot of it's got to do with, like a lot of these developers who have funds, is funds under management. Maybe they'll sacrifice any form of development profit to get the thing built, to get the funds under management, to get the fee. To me, it just seems very peculiar why only funds and overseas funds of that can make it work, and your locals barely can. I don't understand it, but it's certainly, look, I hope it happens, because it would take a lot of the heat. It would certainly help a lot of the poor people who need to get it sorted.
Yeah,
need to get some accommodation. But I suppose I've just got a bit of an asterisk next to that one, going, I just want to delve in a bit more rather than just blindly follow the hype, because I'm sure it takes huge numbers off the street.
And even if, I guess, the end rents are escalated or elevated to account for the costs in construction, then that in itself becomes an issue. You're not resolving the rental crisis for those that need rental accommodation the most, and that's the affordable rental market. Because if you're only targeting a premium, tenant who's going to pay a premium rent, then it sort of defeats the purpose in some regards.
I think I've got it fairly mixed, though. I think they've got not completely sort of lower income, but there's a middle run there as well.
Perfect.
But I'm just not sure it's going to take big numbers of those who need it off the books.
Andrew, you've seen, and I know we've run into a couple of times at a few blocks of units.
Yeah, I like it.
Residential investments, the blocks of units that you do. I know you like them. I know we've looked at a few that you've had on the market. What's happening in that side of things at the moment?
It's a sector that's in demand.
Yep.
So what I'm talking about, blocks of units, I'm talking about one ownership for an entire block of units. Picture what we mostly sell is your traditional brick 6-pack.
Yep.
So there's other ones too. I mean, there's what I say flats. It's maybe your timber homes converted or something similar like that. One owner on one block of land there. Now we sort of morphed into that, and we've ended up selling quite a few in recent times, like a dozen the last year. What we noticed is a staggering amount of buyers. There's a couple of reasons for it. One, it's an asset class that everyone understands. Everyone understands a house or a unit, because that's where they live, right? Not everyone understands industrial or retail or healthcare assets like that. So everyone understands it. There's reliability of income. Now, these are abnormal times trying to, when you get a tenant, anyone can get a tenant, but in more normal times, if you can't get a tenant, you drop the rent by $10 a week and you've got someone. It's not like you go past your local strip shop and the sushi place moves out and it's 6 months vacant, 6 to 12 months vacant, and then the tattoo parlor comes in and he wants another 6 months. He wants 6 months free rent and fit out. So we're seeing a lot of those investors come over to this sector because it's safer. But there's two parts to it. They're getting rent escalation as an owner, but this is where it's different from your strip shop or other assets, is that you're actually getting your rental escalation, but you're actually getting capital appreciation. You're getting, as the house price growth around these suburbs goes up, you are getting the capital appreciation. So some of those, I think the people who do well is just get it and they buy a brick 6-pack. It's rock solid. Maybe it's a bit dated, but it's big. There's not a lot that can go wrong with it. And they put it in the bottom drawer for 10 years and forget about it. And they put it in the bottom drawer for 20 years, they knock it over and they've got a development side. So you've got development upside, but it's important to understand they will factor in that capital appreciation. So the one I sold around the corner from here last year, a year before, was this is a Wilston, blue chip suburb in Brisbane. It was, I think the return, and he got the owner on the passing rent at the time, he probably was only getting a 3% net return or something similar. But he would have had rent escalation, and it's Wilston. So you guys would know better than anyone how much something's gone up in 24 months in Wilston.
Absolutely.
So you get that cap. So you get rental appreciation, capital appreciation, and the flip side is that you can, quite often when the building dies, the underlying zoning is, we saw one up at Albion, was also in a city, Brisbane, 5Ks. I think he had it was a 6-pack. and they could develop up to, I think, 3 or 4 levels under the zoning, and he's just lodged a DA, probably getting 5, and I reckon you could probably get more in the future because people will go, there's amenity, there's transport, where's everyone going to live? So I think they're a good asset class to get into, but you've got to cop some low returns for a little while.
Can I just ask, to help our listeners understand the buying entry value that they would need to purchase an asset like that, what sort of dollars are we looking at for a 4-pack or a 6-pack in some of these blue chip or middle ring locations that you are referring to?
Vast majority of them are 1.5 to 3 million.
Yeah.
And most of them about 2 million, really.
Yeah. And so a $2 million investment for approximately 3% net return.
Oh, you probably get a bit more. Wilson's a bit special, but yeah, you probably get a bit more, yeah.
And keep in mind, if we're looking just at the last 12 months, the median growth in the unit market in rents was around 16%, like really strong growth year on year. So if you're looking at the appreciation in the income that you're going to generate from that property because of the current lack of supply of rental properties, you've got that upside. And you rightly pointed out as well, if we're looking at capital growth across Brisbane, well-located land has certainly escalated in value over the last 9 months as well. So definitely an asset class for those with a higher budget that potentially are willing to take on a little more risk. But at the end of the day, if it's a blue chip location and you're able to secure quality tenants, it's probably less risk than most people think.
The other thing you do find, Andrew, as well, is those type of buildings, they were generally built pretty solid. And there's not a lot that can go wrong with them.
Italian specials.
I was speaking of which, I was at a set of units this morning for a client of ours. It was definitely built by the Italian builders, and it was like a bomb shelter. It was just concrete slabs. It was brickwork.
We've actually had the old Italian builders come out for a look because they all own them. It's hard for us as agents because they never sell them, right? Because they just give their kids. And we've had them come out and go, I built this one, I built that one.
A lot of Brisbane rock solid investments, but it's hard to get hold of them. So that's why a business like ours exists. If you need help with acquiring some of these great assets, reach out to our team at Streamline Property Buyers. So looking at predictions, what do you think's likely to happen? If we look forward in the next 12 months in your part of the market, Andrew, what are you expecting?
Well, without sounding like a politician, I can't give a straight answer because I think everyone groups the markets too easily. I just think it's a market by market. Everyone's, what's the market doing? It's like, what market?
Which segment?
I can give you like a half a sentence answer on each one if you want.
Absolutely. Let's go.
Land sub market. So people who are building land subdivision sites, that will keep just red hot. It'll just keep going and going. Units and townhouses, there'll be more activity there this year. It's, as we discussed this time, it's the construction cost issue. It simply has to stack up to build units or a townhouse to make it work. But look, people can't wait forever. So potentially it could be a few forced sales. If someone's bought prior to the construction cost boom, so if someone's bought some land based on a feasibility on this revenue and this, but this construction cost, it won't stack. They've been sort of treading water for 18 months. They might have to sell. So I think in that market, there'll be a few sales. And the high end market for that stuff will continue to go gangbusters if you can get some sites. And then what else we've got? The blocks of units that will continue to keep going well. And then, the other sort of sites we sell like childcare, they're all fairly strong, although they've taken a hit because a lot of those sites are based on selling us a investment at the end based on a yield, and those interest rates have gone up. So look, overall, it is strong in land, bit patchy in units and townhouses, and other odds and ends probably go okay. So I think it's less patchy than last year, but it's building momentum, and we've come back, and it's just like there's a bit on.
Are you finding that a lot of the developers that are acquiring sites specifically for units and townhouses, they're having to land bank or purchase and hold those properties before they become feasible to actually develop, or are they purchasing and getting in and developing straight away?
Yeah, I think the land banking is a bit of an old school thing. It just doesn't happen anymore. It's just, I know interest rates have risen, making it worse, but even when interest rates were low, there's just a lot of competing uses for capital. Not many people have lazy capital like that. They need to get in straight away and go. What they'll try and do is try and buy it with a long-term settlement, like 9, 12 months. And then so they put it under contract, it's unconditional, and then they start working through the DA. Or what they even do is a lot of our contracts can be conditional contracts. So we're selling a site and they'll put initial due diligence, and then it might be subject to DA, subject to development approval. So, we'll try and safeguard the owner's interest so we get some money for them as the process goes along. So they can't just put it under contract, and when they've got the DA, they say, don't want it now, or give the owner a reduction in price. We'll try and safeguard the owner's interest. But yeah, that's what they're doing. It's subject to DA, but you've got to watch it. That's pretty scary for an owner.
I will also ask, and it's something that you touched on a little earlier, and I didn't ask the question at that time, but landowners who, get together and create or go ahead and put a DA on the site. So they submit that application to council thinking that's going to elevate or increase the value of their site. So you might have 4 landowners that each own a house, just because the land has the capacity to be developed, they go ahead and combine resources to get the development approval in place to then put it on the market. I guess that's when you get the call up and you put it out to developers, but it's just not feasible. What advice have you got to people that think that's going to add value to their site?
Double check. Just because your town planner, or more importantly, your architect thinks you can do this, just check it's actually profitable.
Yes.
Because architects can get carried away and we can do this and we can do that. And I think everyone, and look, Australians have a very unusually high interest in property. And everyone is a little hero property expert. So if you can say, I had my house and I pulled together my neighbours and I've got this DA, it does make you sound like quite the hero at the barbecue.
It does.
But you do just double check you're actually making money on it. Like that. What's the highest and best use? What's the highest and best use is always got to be the question. So before you charge off and get more intense use, more dwelling, more things on your block of land, before you spend that money, actually double check, is it worthwhile to do so?
And getting professional advice in that regard, not just assuming that you have the knowledge to be able to make that assessment.
And the other key point too is if you're going to work with adjacent owners, really set your rules in place very early, because someone will say, well, my land's higher, or my land's got the pool, or sort that out. Because when the developer buying it, if he's spending say $2 million, he doesn't care if it's 1 million here and 1 million for that contract. But someone will be saying, I want 1.2, the other person should be getting 8. So that's something you've got to sort out as well.
That's good advice. So if you are looking to create some upside and talking to your neighbours to amalgamate sites in hope that you have a site that is worth more as a development site, that's really good advice. Talk to your neighbours, set that plan in place first, and get some professional advice in that regard on value before you actually add any extra development approvals.
Across too negative. A lot of those sites are profitable.
They can be,
but a lot of them aren't.
That's right. No, it's good advice. And, I think the message here is understand what opportunity you are providing to the market and determine whether the market wants what you've got to offer before you go spending a lot of money.
Do you see much change, Andrew, because obviously the rental crisis that we've got at the moment, do you see much change happening in that in the social housing and that sort of area?
Well, there's a lot of money being thrown at that at the moment. You can tell a lot of those or direct government organisations and indirect government organisations being funded. They are they have a lot of money that we're speaking to a lot of them saying, I've got this grant's definitely going to come through, or this is coming, what have you got? So that's something that's quite interesting, actually, because I think they'll have a different sort of mandate than your traditional developers. So maybe the sites, it's interesting for sellers, sites that may not work for a traditional developer, the social housing model could work because I don't know if there's maybe less parking requirements, or they're getting a boost in funding. There's different things where they might be able to make a a property stack where others wouldn't. An example would be, I mean, these sorts of places aren't going in blue chip locations, or if they are, they're sort of in secondary locations there where they'd be on a main road or something. So the end value is going to come down for a traditional developer because you're on a main road or a secondary location in general. But that's sort of what they want.
Yeah.
And look, I think it's important to note that that's a slow process because with social housing, the way the system works is they don't want big clusters, they don't want big areas of it because that ruins everyone's value around them.
Yes.
And traditionally, these people don't like more than 8-20 units in one spot. So 8 to 20 units, that's not taking too many people off the street. That's a long haul. So it'll be useful, but I think we've just got a few more years of that pain to go. But I think it makes more sense doing it that way than having a whole heap of major centres, which brings out a lot of social problems.
I think that there's been some gold that you've shared today. And for those that haven't written down some of the things that I've picked up, here's a couple of recaps that I'm just going to run through. The first thing is that replacement cost, or the cost to build brand new units entry level in Brisbane at the moment, is sitting around that $850,000 mark. So opportunity for purchasing under replacement cost, if you're looking at units in the established market, it's there. So you're actually buying under replacement cost if you're buying in the right location. That's just a little tip number one that I've extracted from something that you've said. I will say, though, as an extension to that, not all units are created equal, and it's still about identifying the locations where the fundamentals are there in terms of the supply and demand metrics. We do know that there's more units that have been approved, but they're sitting dormant because they're not yet feasible. In time, they will become feasible. They will be developed. So investment fundamentals, it's just a little snip that I picked up, and I thought I would share once again for those that may not have actually read into those numbers.
I completely agree. I mean, we sell these blocks of units, but if someone wants to buy an individual unit, it's not our bag, they should be talking to you. I really believe that. And I would be buying a second-hand unit, be my tip. And because I don't think this construction cost crisis and the supply of units is changing quickly. It can't. There's too much going on in southeast Queensland for the construction cost to drop. It will stay the same. So the only way this will change is if the house prices go up enough that these revenues on the units go up enough. Start buying units. I reckon chat to you guys and buy.
Let's not get all of the secrets out there, Andrew. The purpose of the podcast is not to share all our secrets. But look,
some ordinary units too, so you need to know which ones to go there.
You know, you're absolutely right there. But, Scott and I started to talk about the unit market 2 years ago on this podcast in January 2022. We're now 2024. In that time, we've seen huge price escalation. Even in the last 12 months, we've seen 11.1% across Greater Brisbane in terms of unit price growth. That was only just behind house price growth. So not only are you getting this huge uplift in terms of rental price increases, you're also getting capital appreciation. But you are right. You've identified it's not every unit is the same, and it's really important that you're getting some strategic advice around where and what to buy if you are going to investigate that part of the market. But when I look at replacement cost values that you've shared today, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I'm not going to go back and say we told you so about the units either. But mate, just a quick summary. Look, I know that the listeners hear us talk about Brisbane. What are your thoughts? Going forward, and I know, again, we do talk about this all the time. People are probably sick of us saying it, but it's going to happen. We've got the 2032 Olympics happening. What do you see happening in Brisbane?
Yeah, what everyone understands is what the Olympics does is guaranteed spend on infrastructure. That's what I think. Like owners always want to say we've got the Olympics to interstate people. That just sort of sounds like a bit of a con. And it sounds like, well, what's 10 days do to your market? But you have guaranteed infrastructure spend, which is jobs and a whole heap of other things that fly through the economy. So I think it's the most unbelievable positive story. And if I'm selling development sites, I'd only want to be in Brisbane. And if things are actually pretty good at the moment, but there's a couple of little issues in various sub-markets. If I was a buyer, get in now before it's all hunky-dory again. Get going.
So what do you think?
This is perfect time to go.
Interest rates likely to come down 2024. Perhaps that's the stimulus that, some people are waiting for. And we've learned from past experience, if you wait until the masses are, in the market, then you're just going to be competing with more and more. And prices obviously continue to escalate in that time as well.
Population's increasing and the land is constrained. It's a supply issue and demand is still coming and won't stop. Get in there now. Like I'm not selling development sites out at Quilpie here, where there's masses and masses of land. No offense to any listeners at Quilpie, but it's only going to go one way. And the fact it's a bit unsteady now is a great thing for you.
Well, I think that's pretty much summed up what's happening in that development space and what's happening in Southeast Queensland as a whole when we take a broad snapshot view of that supply and demand imbalance. And it's something we talk often about on this podcast. We might talk about listing volumes as immediate supply, but of course, long-term supply, it's relative to what is being built, what's being constructed, what's being supplied to the market in terms of those new builds. And from what you're saying, it's really tight in that market as well. So we're going to need to see some real shifts before there's balance again. And we know that whilst we've got that imbalance and demand is exceeding supply, we will continue to get price growth.
But thanks very much for coming in. It's always great to chat. We should do it more often. For people obviously in that special project sort of section, getting in touch with you guys, what's the easiest way to get in touch with you, Andrew?
Yeah, just shoot us an email. So andrew.burke@raywhite.com.
Yep.
We'll put that in the show notes as well.
Yep. And we'll just give you an honest appraisal from development, site sale and residential investment experts. And we're in this for the long haul, so we won't burn relationships. Owners have come to us and said, what do you think? And we'll say, if it was me, you got a great property, keep it in your bottom drawer for another 2 years. So if it's not the time to sell now, we'll just tell you the truth.
Very good advice.
Perfect. Thanks, mate. Thanks again for coming in. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure our listeners appreciate the insights that you have from your side of things. As usual, I will let Melinda wrap it up for this week. It's been great talking. Thanks very much for listening. From me, bye for now.
Yes, thank you so much once again to all our listeners for tuning into the Brisbane Property Podcast. As always, if you've enjoyed this episode, please share with friends and family. We would love for you to leave us a review. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. We hope you have a fabulous week and we will look forward to speaking with you again soon. Bye for now.